I still remember the silence that fell over the conference room. 23 pairs of eyes locked on me, 22 in shock, and one, Brad Thompson's, in pure, undiluted panic. "What did you just say?" Mr. Whitman, our CEO, asked, his bushy eyebrows shooting up so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. I stood my ground, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. I said, "This revolutionary AI integration system that Brad is presenting? It's already patented, in my name, filed 3 months ago, approved last week." I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out the official documents, sliding them across the polished mahogany table. "So, yes, it is brilliant, and I'd be happy to discuss licensing terms with Pinnacle Tech. Unless you prefer, I take it elsewhere." Brad's face drained of all color. The golden boy of Pinnacle Technology, with his perfect teeth and Harvard MBA, looked like he might actually faint. Just 20 minutes earlier, he'd been confidently presenting my work, the culmination of 18 months of my life, as if he'd conceived every line of code himself. "There must be some mistake," Brad stammered, his voice suddenly an octave higher. "Marcus and I collaborated on parts of this, but the core architecture was my—" "Actually," I interrupted, "every element of this system, from the self-learning algorithm to the cross-platform integration protocols, is documented in my personal development logs, time-stamped and verified. I can provide access to the repository immediately." The tension in that room was so thick you could have cut it with a knife, and just like that, my carefully constructed professional mask, the one I'd worn every day for 2 years as the only black software engineer on our floor, cracked wide open. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back 3 months earlier. It started on what should have been the proudest day of my career at Pinnacle. I'd finally perfected the adaptive learning algorithm that would revolutionize our flagship product. After pulling an all-nighter, I walked into the office early, planning to polish my presentation before the weekly innovation meeting. "Marcus, just the man I wanted to see." Brad's voice caught me as I exited the elevator. Brad Thompson, VP of Product Development, with his perfect smile and tailored suits, had always been cordial but distant. Today, he had his arm around my shoulder like we were old friends. "Got a minute?" He steered me toward his corner office, a space 3 times the size of my cubicle, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Boston. I'd been in there exactly twice before. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing to his personal espresso machine. "No thanks," I replied, instantly on guard. Brad Thompson didn't make a coffee for people. "So, Marcus," he said, settling into his ergonomic chair, "word is you've been working on something big, an adaptive AI integration system?" I nodded cautiously. "I was actually planning to present the prototype today at the innovation meeting." Brad's smile widened. "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. The thing is, Marcus, this project needs to be positioned carefully. The board has been skeptical about further AI investments after the Williams debacle last quarter." He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I think we should hold off on your presentation. Let me take this to Whitman privately first, feel out the terrain. With my history with the board, I can frame it in a way they'll be receptive to." Something cold settled in my stomach. "I appreciate the offer, Brad, but I'm comfortable presenting my own work." "Marcus," his tone shifted subtly, "this isn't just about your comfort level. This is about what's best for the company, for the project itself." He paused. "For your future here at Pinnacle." The implied threat hung in the air between us. "The board trusts me," he continued. "I've got their ear. Let me use that to your advantage. We'll present it as a collaborative effort, you handling the technical development, me handling the business implementation." He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Team players get ahead at Pinnacle, Marcus. Remember that." I left Brad's office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. For 2 years, I'd kept my head down, worked twice as hard as everyone else, swallowed every microaggression and well-intentioned comment about how articulate I was. And now, just when I'd created something truly innovative, Brad wanted to dilute my contribution. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called in sick, something I'd never done before, and headed straight to a patent attorney I'd found online. I emptied nearly my entire savings account to fast-track the patent application for my AI system. "This is impressive work," said Elaine Chen, the patent attorney, as she reviewed my documentation. "Why the rush?" I hesitated before answering. "Honestly, corporate politics. I need to protect myself." She nodded knowingly. "Smart move. Document everything. And I mean everything. Every conversation, every email, every development log. Paper trails are your best friend." That conversation sparked something in me. After leaving Elaine's office, instead of going home, I went to a small electronics store and purchased a digital voice recorder, small enough to fit discreetly in my shirt pocket. The next day, I returned to work as if nothing had happened. Brad cornered me immediately. "Marcus, feeling better? Listen, I took the liberty of pulling some of the documentation on your project. I need you to walk me through the technical aspects so I can start framing the business case." I nodded, playing along while the recorder captured every word. Over the next few weeks, I maintained the facade of cooperation while meticulously documenting everything. I forwarded all our email exchanges to my personal account. I kept detailed logs of every collaborative meeting, where Brad asked increasingly detailed questions about my work. Meanwhile, I noticed something odd. Janet from HR, who had always been friendly but not particularly close to me, suddenly started inviting me to lunch. Janet was a middle-aged white woman with kind eyes who'd been with Pinnacle for 15 years. She'd always seemed like a company lifer, not the type to rock the boat. "How are things going with the AI project?" she asked during our third lunch, picking at her salad. I gave her my standard answer about making good progress, but she fixed me with a knowing look. "Marcus, I've been at Pinnacle a long time. I've seen how things work." She lowered her voice. "Brad has a history. This isn't the first time he's borrowed someone else's work." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" 2 years ago, a young engineer, Lily Chen, developed a breakthrough security protocol. Brad presented it as a joint project. 6 months later, Lily was let go during restructuring, and Brad got a promotion. Janet sighed. "I couldn't prove anything then, but I've been watching." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked cautiously. "Because what's happening isn't right, and because Pinnacle needs people like you, actual innovators." She hesitated, then added, "I'm retiring next year. I've got nothing to lose anymore." Janet's revelation was the first piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. That evening, I did some digging and found Lily Chen on LinkedIn. After some hesitation, I sent her a message asking if we could talk. We met at a coffee shop far from the Pinnacle offices. Lily, now working for a startup, was initially reluctant to discuss her experience. "It's in the past," she said. "I've moved on." "I understand," I replied, "but I think Brad is doing the same thing to me that he did to you." Her expression hardened. "Then you need to protect yourself better than I did. I trusted the system. I thought the truth would come out." She laughed bitterly. "The system is designed to protect people like Brad, not people like us." "Us?" I prompted gently. Lily met my eyes. "People who don't fit the mold of what a tech innovator is supposed to look like." Before we parted, Lily gave me a small USB drive. "I kept records," she said. "Not enough to save my job back then, but maybe enough to help you now. Be careful, Marcus. Brad has friends in high places." The USB drive contained emails and documentation showing a pattern strikingly similar to what was happening with my project. But the real bombshell was a recorded conversation where Brad explicitly told Lily to let him handle the presentation of her security protocol because the board responds better to certain people. I now had evidence that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was Brad's modus operandi, finding talented engineers who didn't fit the traditional mold, stealing their work, and discarding them once he'd extracted what he needed. But I still needed more if I wanted to stop him. That's when I remembered something Janet had mentioned. Brad has a history. How far back did this pattern go? I spent the next week researching former Pinnacle employees, reaching out cautiously through LinkedIn and industry forums. 3 more stories emerged, all with the same pattern, all involving women or people of color who had left the company after Brad had collaborated with them on successful projects. Meanwhile, at the office, Brad was moving faster than I'd anticipated. He called an executive presentation without informing me, scheduled for just 1 week after my patent would be officially approved. It was clear he planned to present my work as primarily his own, with me as a minor contributor at best. The night before the patent approval came through, I received an unexpected email from another former Pinnacle employee, Michael Okafor, a Nigerian-born engineer who had left the company 4 years earlier. "I saw your message on the forum," he wrote. "What you're describing happened to me too, but I didn't leave empty-handed. Call me." The next morning, I called Michael from my car before heading into the office. "Brad did the same thing to me," Michael confirmed. "But I was lucky. I'd been recording our meetings for my own reference. My accent sometimes meant people misunderstood my technical explanations." He chuckled. "I never intended to use those recordings the way I eventually did." "What did you do?" I asked, heart racing. I made a copy of Brad's laptop when he left it unattended one day. Not the most ethical move, I admit, but I was desperate. What I found was a document, a literal playbook, outlining how to identify and target undervalued resources within the company. Undervalued resources? That's what he called us. Engineers with great ideas but without the right profile to advance them independently. His document detailed how to cultivate their trust, extract their innovations, and then ease them out once their usefulness was over. My blood ran cold. "Do you still have this document?" "Better. I have the original and all subsequent versions." He kept updating it. After I confronted him privately with what I'd found, we reached an arrangement. He provided me with a generous severance and glowing recommendations, and I kept quiet. But I kept copies of everything as insurance. "Would you be willing to share that with me?" There was a long pause. "I have a great job now, a family. I can't risk being dragged into a legal battle." "I understand," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "But," Michael continued, "I could send you an anonymous package. What you do with it would be entirely your decision." 2 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a USB drive containing Brad's predatory playbook, along with years of documentation showing his systematic exploitation of colleagues. It was damning evidence of not just unethical behavior, but potentially illegal discrimination. Now, armed with my newly approved patent, Lily's evidence, my own recordings, and Brad's incriminating playbook, I had what I needed. But timing would be crucial. I decided to let Brad proceed with his presentation. I would confront him publicly with all the executives as witnesses. It was risky. Brad had allies on the board, but I was done playing it safe. The day of the presentation arrived. I dressed with particular care. A sharp navy suit, crisp white shirt, my best tie. I arrived early and took a seat at the conference table, placing my messenger bag with all my evidence beside me. Brad entered, flanked by 2 board members he'd been cultivating. He faltered slightly when he saw me, but recovered quickly. "Marcus, didn't expect to see you here. Wouldn't miss it," I replied evenly. "After all, this project has been my life for the past 18 months. Brad's smile tightened. "Of course. Your technical input has been valuable." Mr. Whitman and the rest of the executive team filed in, and the presentation began. I sat silently as Brad walked through the system architecture, my system architecture, explaining it as if he'd conceived every element himself. He mentioned my name exactly once as part of a list of team members who provided support. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Mr. Whitman was particularly enthusiastic. "This is exactly the kind of innovation Pinnacle needs." "Brad, this is brilliant work." That's when I stood up. "Yes, it is brilliant, and it's patented in my name. Would you like to discuss royalties?" Which brings us back to where this story began, with 23 pairs of eyes staring at me, and Brad Thompson looking like he might pass out. Mr. Whitman examined my patent documentation with a deepening frown. "These appear to be in order," he said slowly. "Brad, what's the meaning of this?" Brad attempted to regain control. "There's been a misunderstanding. Marcus and I worked on this together. He's handling the technical aspects while I developed the business applications. Obviously, there was some confusion about the patent filing." "There's no confusion," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have recordings of our conversations where you explicitly asked me to explain my system to you. I have email, trails showing the development timeline, and I have this. I pulled out a copy of Brad's playbook, a document detailing your systematic approach to appropriating the work of employees you consider undervalued resources. The room went completely silent. "That's a private document," Brad said, his voice barely audible. "Yes, it is," I agreed. "A private document outlining how you target employees, specifically women and minorities, to steal their innovations. I've also taken the liberty of compiling testimony from 4 former employees who experience exactly what I'm experiencing now." Mr. Whitman's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Robinson." "They are," I agreed, "and I'm prepared to substantiate every one of them." I turned to Brad. "I'm not Lily Chen, or Michael Okafor, or any of the others you pushed out after taking credit for their work. I came prepared." What happened next unfolded with dizzying speed. Brad was escorted from the building that same day, pending an investigation. I was asked to turn over all my evidence to the company's legal team. Within a week, Brad had been terminated, and I was called into a private meeting with Mr. Whitman and the board. I braced myself for retaliation. Perhaps they'd find a way to push me out too, despite my precautions. Instead, Mr. Whitman offered me a formal apology and a promotion. "Your AI system is remarkable," he said, "and the way you handled this situation shows exactly the kind of integrity and leadership Pinnacle needs." I was stunned. "Thank you, sir, but there's something else we need to discuss." "What's that?" "The other employees affected by Brad's actions. Lily Chen, in particular, deserves recognition for her security protocol. And compensation." Mr. Whitman shifted uncomfortably. "That's a complicated situation, legally speaking. I understand. But making it right would demonstrate that Pinnacle truly values innovation, regardless of who creates it." 2 months later, Pinnacle held a special event announcing the launch of the Robinson-Chen Security Integration System, a combination of my AI work and Lily's previously suppressed security protocol. Lily was brought on as a consultant, with full credit and compensation for her contributions. As for me, I now lead Pinnacle's newly formed Innovation Protection Team, ensuring that all employees receive proper credit and compensation for their intellectual contributions. Janet decided to postpone her retirement to join my team, bringing her years of HR experience to help reshape the company culture. Brad Thompson, I heard, had trouble finding another position in the industry. Apparently, news of his playbook had spread through unofficial channels. Last I heard, he was selling real estate in Florida. Sometimes I think about that moment in the conference room, the moment I finally stood up. For 2 years, I'd tried to play by rules designed to keep people like me in our place. I'd believed that exceptional work would speak for itself. What I learned is that brilliance isn't enough in a system built to overlook it. Sometimes you have to fight for recognition, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. The patent certificate for my AI system hangs on my office wall now. My office with a door that closes and windows that overlook the city. Next to it hangs a small digital voice recorder in a frame, with an inscription that reads, "Speak truth, but keep receipts." Every time a young engineer from an underrepresented background joins our team, I make sure they see both. Some battles you fight not just to win, but to ensure others won't have to fight them again.